Hey guys, tonight we're unzipping something most people wouldn't dare peek inside. The dark, mysterious, and honestly a bit musty world behind Louis Vuitton, the luxury brand that turned luggage into a personality and monogrammed canvas into a lifestyle. If you've ever wondered what's lurking behind those $2,000 handbags, the answer is more than just receipts and existential dread. So before you slip into your silk pajamas or that suspiciously comfortable bathrobe you borrowed from a hotel, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy being lured into the shadowy corners of fashion history by a stranger on the internet. Leave a comment telling me which designer item you secretly regret buying, or just let me know if you've ever used a tote bag as an emergency lunchbox. It's a safe space here. Now, dim those lights, fire up your fan for that gentle, I'm on a yacht white noise, and get comfortable. Maybe surround yourself with pillows the way Louis Vuitton surrounds you with subtle reminders that you will never truly be French. But let's pause for a second. What's the true cost of luxury? Could you survive a day lugging trunks for Parisian aristocrats with more shoes than friends? What happens if you accidentally spill red wine on a $5,000 bag? Did people really travel in steamer trunks that doubled as panic rooms? Is there an actual secret society of luggage butlers? Or am I just inventing that to justify my life choices? And most importantly, was the world's most famous luxury brand built on more than just taste and tan leather, maybe a little bit of scandal? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in 19th century France, in a workshop that smells faintly of glue, ambition, and the desperate hopes of everyone who ever wanted to look rich. You're not a style icon, you're a luggage maker, and your day just got interesting. Before Louis Vuitton was the name on your aunt's investment bag, you were just a scrawny kid dodging mud puddles in Enche, France, apprenticing under grumpy craftsmen who considered splinters a personality trait. The world's most coveted luggage empire? Not even a fever dream yet. Your mornings begin before the rooster even decides whether life is worth crowing about. You're not a prodigy. You're mostly a pair of sore feet and big eyes, hoping today's chores don't involve anything with the word latrine in it. In 1821 rural France, opulence means your shoes have two soles, and fashion means your tunic doesn't smell like last month's turnip harvest. Most days, your hair is permanently crusted with a mysterious paste of sawdust, and what you sincerely hope is glue. Your apprenticeship is less tailored mentorship and more. Please do this before I throw something. The workshop is not some Parisian dreamscape. It's a chilly, unheated shed, the kind of place where the only thing more plentiful than ambition is wood shavings. The air smells of tannin, sweat, and the quiet despair of a man who's been told, once again, that his dovetail joints are just not quite right. Your tools are ancient. A mallet, a hand plane, and a suspiciously blunt chisel. Your teacher, Monsieur Morel, is mostly a moustache with a body attached, and he can spot a crooked seam from across the room, usually right before swearing creatively in 3 dialects. You learn quickly that splinters are a way of life. Gloves are for aristocrats and people with no intention of becoming real craftsmen. Every nick, scrape and blood stain on your hands is proof that you're learning, at least according to Morel, who hasn't had feeling in his left thumb since 1799. The days are long. The windows let in just enough light to remind you that somewhere outside other children are not accidentally gluing their sleeves to workbenches. By midday your stomach is staging a protest march. Lunch is a crust of bread hard enough to file your nails, and if you're lucky, a slice of cheese so dry it predates Napoleon's last good mood. You gnaw in silence, surrounded by men who speak in grunts and communicate mostly via raised eyebrows and the occasional affectionate threat involving a wooden mallet. But here's the surprising part. You don't hate it. Not exactly. There's a rhythm to the workshop, the steady thud of hammers, the rasp of files, the low whistle of someone who's just realized they nailed a board to the floor again. You watch Morel shape a trunk lid until it's as smooth as polished stone. his hands moving with the easy confidence of someone who knows his craft and isn't afraid to tell you you're doing it wrong. Every now and then you get it right. A joint fits snugly, a hinge aligns, and for a brief shining moment, you feel like you might not be completely hopeless after all. As the seasons change, so does your role. From hauling planks to cutting leather, you slowly earn the right to actually touch the expensive materials, after swearing on your honour that you won't let any more barn cats nap on the velvet linings. Your clothes take on a permanent aroma of oil and ambition. When a passing merchant mentions Paris, you can barely imagine it. In Angers, the biggest scandal is when someone forgets to latch the goat pen. And yet, as you sweep up another avalanche of shaving, something stirs inside you. Maybe it's ambition. Maybe it's a desperate desire for central heating. Either way, you start dreaming. Not of gold or fame, but of trunks so perfectly crafted that even a Parisian would be forced to admire them. You don't know it yet, but every splinter, every groan, every stern look from Morel is a tiny wooden step towards something enormous. So you keep working. You patch your tunic, bandage your fingers, and learn to spot a knot in the wood by touch alone. You are, for now, just another trunk boy in a sleepy village. But history, like a good trunk, is built piece by piece, in sheds that smell like glue and hope. One day they'll remember your name, not for the splinters, but for what you carried with you all along. Time to sweep up. Tomorrow you get to sand the lids if the cats haven't claimed them first. You're 15, your shoes are falling apart, and Paris is a 2-year walk away, literally. If you survive the blisters, you'll still have to convince Parisians that the countryside doesn't automatically mean you smell like goat. Spoiler, they're not easy to persuade. You start your journey with a little more than a bundle of stale bread, a pocket knife, and the kind of optimism only available to people who have never actually attempted a 2-year walk. Your mother hugs you goodbye with the same energy she'd use if you were heading into battle. Your father offers advice: keep your head down, trust no one, never accept cheese from a man named Jean-Pierre. Wise words, though by week 3 you'll be desperate enough to eat anything handed to you, Jean-Pierre or not. The road to Paris is not lined with opportunity. It's lined with mud, horse droppings, and the relentless suspicion that your socks are developing their own ecosystem. Every morning you wake up sore, stiff, and questioning the life choices that led you here. Your shoes, originally designed for casual ambling to the next village, begin to disintegrate somewhere near Dijon, forcing you to improvise. For a few days you experiment with grass insoles, extra straw, and at one low point some extremely crunchy cabbage leaves. Congratulations, you've invented the world's first biodegradable sneaker. Travelling on foot in the 1830s isn't a romantic adventure. It's a series of escalating inconveniences punctuated by occasional terror. Every innkeeper eyes you with suspicion. You learn to sleep in barns, under hedges, and once in the comforting embrace of an abandoned wheelbarrow. Rain becomes your most loyal companion, and it always knows when you've just managed to get dry. Food is a creative affair. You quickly realise the countryside runs on a barter system. A few hours of stacking hay in exchange for half a turnip. Or, on special occasions, a hunk of bread so dense it could double as self-defence. Sometimes you're paid in stories, which don't fill your stomach but do make the nights a little less lonely. You collect rumours of Paris like treasures, tales of sparkling boulevards, towering cathedrals and pastry shops that would bring a tear to your eye and a cavity to your molar. Along the way, you meet other travellers, merchants, beggars, lost poets, and the occasional sheep who seems to be more confident about their destination than you. Some offer wisdom, others offer fleas. You accept both, mostly because you're too tired to argue. By month 8, you've learnt the importance of camouflage, blending in with the scenery to avoid the attention of highwaymen, tax collectors, and especially the dreaded unsolicited accordion players. You become adept at looking both harmless and uninteresting, a skill that, ironically, will later serve you well in luxury retail. Personal hygiene is a delicate subject. Rivers become your bath. Soap, if you ever see it, is regarded as a minor miracle. You develop what can only be described as a robust rural bouquet. When you finally stagger into the outskirts of Paris, even the city rats cross the street to avoid you. Paris, of course, is nothing like the rumours. The city is loud, crowded, and smells strongly of ambition, horses, and a faint whiff of existential crisis. You immediately stand out as provincial, a word the locals pronounce as if it's both an insult and a diagnosis. Your accent marks you as a foreigner, and your patched-up clothing says, "Please rob me, but you'll be disappointed." But beneath the chaos, there's magic. The streets shimmer with possibility. You see your first real trunk, a masterpiece of leather and brass, gliding atop a carriage as if it owns the road. For the first time, you realize why you walked all this way. Paris is absurd, overwhelming, and deeply, unapologetically stylish. So you breathe in, discreetly because of the goats, straighten your ruined shoes, and march into the city. The blisters, hunger, and indignities fade for a moment, replaced by the quiet certainty that, no matter how badly you smell, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Welcome to Paris. Time to make them remember your name, preferably after you find a bath. You thought making bags would be glamorous. Instead, it's sawdust, harsh glue, and a boss who'd sooner throw a hammer than pay overtime. Every day you inhale enough varnish fumes to question if monograms are just hallucinations. Let's set the scene. It's your first real job in the city, and Paris is supposed to be the epicenter of sophistication. But in reality, your world has shrunk to the back corner of a cramped workshop, where the only chic thing is the way the light filters through a cloud of wood dust every morning. Your workstation is a rickety table that's seen so many spilled bottles of shellac it's become permanently sticky. A minor tragedy if you're hoping to keep your sleeves clean, which, let's be honest, is already a lost cause. You start the day by sweeping up what feels like half a forest in sawdust, and then tracking the other half home in your hair, cuffs, and possibly your socks. Your uniform is whatever you didn't ruin yesterday. There's a perpetual glue crust under your fingernails, a badge of honour that also doubles as a social deterrent. If you're lucky, you might get to cut leather scraps for a trunk's lining. If you're unlucky, you'll spend hours sorting brass tacks by size, a task designed less for organisation and more for contemplating the deeper meaning of futility. Your boss, Monsieur Lefebvre, is a legend in his own mind. He speaks fluent sarcasm, wears a smock stained with the history of every failed project, and can spot a crooked seam from across the room, or at least claims he can. He's the kind of man who believes apprentices should be seen, not heard, unless you're screaming because you've sewn your thumb to a handle again. Whenever you ask a question, you get either a lesson in trunk-making philosophy or a new nickname that probably translates to hopeless lump of dough. There are no Employee of the Month plaques, only an old ledger with a list of names, half of them crossed out, all with comments like dropped a trunk on his own foot or couldn't tell calfskin from cardboard. Lunch is not a break, it's a negotiation. You fight for a spot near the one open window, inhaling stale baguette and eau de contact cement. You talk shop with your fellow apprentices, who all have the haunted look of people who know that today's mistake could become tomorrow's anecdote, if they're lucky enough to have survived it. Gossip revolves around who botched the latest order, which customer sent back a trunk for excessive squeaking, and who finally had the courage to ask for a raise. Nobody. Ever. In the afternoons, you become a machine, hammering, gluing, stitching, repeating. Your knuckles are constantly scraped raw. You discover new muscles in your back by pulling them in spectacularly embarrassing ways. You develop a sixth sense for when Monsieur Lefebvre is about to appear behind you, ready to offer constructive feedback with the delicacy of a runaway carriage. Every evening you stumble home covered in a mosaic of stains, glue, dye, a mysterious speckle of something you hope wasn't alive an hour ago. The city sparkles outside, but your only luxury is the knowledge that you didn't accidentally attach a handle upside down today. Occasionally you catch a glimpse of a completed trunk being delivered to a glamorous address. For a moment you feel a twinge of pride. Your work, your literal blood, sweat, and possibly tears, will be part of someone's grand journey, even if your own greatest adventure is surviving another day in the shop without setting your sleeves on fire. But here's the truth. As much as you complain, you're learning. Each mishap is a lesson. Each mistake, a new scar and a new story. You find satisfaction in the rhythm of craft, in the small, stubborn victories, a perfectly fitted hinge, a lining with no wrinkles, a nod of approval, or at least less shouting, from Monsieur Lefebvre. So you stick with it, despite the fumes, the fatigue, and the ever-present threat of flying hammers. Because deep down, you know that every master trunk maker started as a dazed, glue-encrusted apprentice. And if you can survive this, maybe, just maybe, there's a monogrammed future waiting for you yet. Congratulations, you finally made it. Your clients are now aristocrats who need 4 trunks for a weekend trip and who judge you for folding socks the wrong way. Your job is part craftsman, part therapist, and part disaster insurance. You stand in a marbled foyer, surrounded by enough luggage to supply a small army or a moderately vain duchess on her way to a country wedding. There are trunks for hats, trunks for shoes, trunks just for the duchess's collection of handkerchiefs, each one embroidered with her initials and at least 3 grievances. You've officially entered the world where packing light means leaving the spare tiara at home. It's not just about making the trunks, it's about curating an entire travel experience. Each piece must be perfectly measured, meticulously lined, and most crucially, utterly incapable of offending the owner's delicate sensibilities. You spend hours folding silk blouses with trembling hands, terrified that a single crease will be interpreted as a personal slight. Socks must be arranged in colour order, scarves must be rolled, not folded, and heaven help you if a leather glove dares to touch a velvet slipper. But it's more than just packing. You become an amateur psychologist, deciphering the cryptic, whispered preferences of people who see difficult as a badge of honour. The Comte de Brissac can't travel unless his evening slippers are packed left shoe on top, right shoe beneath, always. The Marquise insists her perfume bottles ride in their own padded compartment, lest her rosewater mingle with anything citrus, or God forbid, lavender. You nod, smile, and make a mental note never to mention lavender in polite company again. Your hands are permanently scented with a cocktail of fine leather, starch, and whatever experimental cologne is currently in fashion among the nobility. Sometimes, when you're alone with the trunks, you wonder if anyone ever just packs a sandwich and goes to the park like a normal person. Here, even the picnic baskets have their own monograms. Of course, disaster lurks behind every buckle. The stakes are higher than you'd ever imagined. One spilled vial of perfume, one scuff on the calfskin, and you're facing a social catastrophe on the scale of a minor revolution. One memorable afternoon, a trunk lock jams, trapping the Countess's jewellery inside just as the carriage is about to depart. The resulting panic involves 3 servants, 2 locksmiths, and a distant cousin with a very strong opinion on how to use a crowbar. You patch things up, literally and emotionally, and vow never to mention it again, unless someone brings up travel stress, in which case you have the perfect story. You learn to anticipate needs before they're spoken. You start packing emergency kits, tiny sewing supplies, stain removers, secret pockets for love letters that are, if you're honest, much more likely to be angry notes about who stole whose opera gloves. You draft checklists so long they require their own trunk. You develop an encyclopedic knowledge of every aristocrat's quirks. Who needs chocolate for the train? Who gets seasick? Who requires a new pair of stockings every day and will absolutely notice if you try to sneak in yesterday's pair? By the end of the day, you're part invisible butler, part disaster insurance policy, and part myth. The Paris elite trust you with their most personal possessions and their deepest travel anxieties, often without ever learning your name, and as the carriage rattles away, stacked high with the fruits of your nervous labour, you allow yourself a moment of satisfaction and maybe a long, relieved exhale. Until, of course, you remember the Duchess's third trunk is still sitting in the vestibule. But that's life for those who serve the fashionable. One foot in the world of luxury, the other forever dodging disaster. And if you do your job right, the only thing anyone will remember is that their socks arrived perfectly folded in the correct shade order and not a single monogram was out of place. When the emperor wants his hats packed just so, you comply, or else. The rise of trunk chic means everyone wants to look like they're running away from a coup, even if they're just visiting their mother-in-law. Let's set the scene. Paris is vibrating with rumours, intrigue, and more plumed hats than common sense. If you're anyone who's anyone, you're travelling, and if you're travelling, you're packing. Not just a bag or two, but an entire mobile wardrobe. And at the centre of this great movement, one small man with an enormous hat, an even bigger ego, and a travel schedule that would break Google Maps. Napoleon is not the sort of customer who writes a polite complaint. He's the sort who expects his bicorn hats arranged by angle, his medals displayed so they catch the light just so, and his personal snacks compartmented with military precision. If anything is off, if a single feather is bent, someone will spend the afternoon in exile, or at least in the broom closet. You learn to pack with the kind of care normally reserved for bomb disposal experts, but it isn't just Napoleon. The entire French elite, desperate to keep up with imperial fashion, suddenly crave trunks that announce their status, taste, and most importantly, wealth. Trunk chic is the phrase of the day. Gone are the battered chests of peasantry. Now, every trunk is a masterpiece. Polished brass corners, custom linings, secret compartments for documents, and enough gilded initials to blind a cavalry regiment. This new era is both opportunity and nightmare. Your workshop becomes a war zone of leather, canvas, and panic. Orders pour in, a case for my walking sticks, a separate trunk just for my collection of snuff boxes, a compartment for the family parrot who does not like to be jostled. You wonder sometimes if you're making luggage or stage props for a travelling circus. Every delivery feels like a military operation. You schedule trunk shipments around parades and troop movements. One wrong move, and your masterpiece could be commandeered as a barricade or worse, mistaken for an enemy supply cache. One morning, you find your best hat case pressed into service as a drummer boy's seat. You try to take pride in the versatility, but it's difficult when you're scraping mud off velvet. Packing for the powerful is less about storage and more about crisis management. You become an expert in the psychology of the panicked aristocrat. Monsieur, if the emperor's hat is not at hand, the entire campaign will be delayed. You learn to pre-pack disaster kits, spare ribbons, backup buttons, a discreet bottle of brandy for nervous generals. Sometimes you're rewarded with a grateful nod. Other times, you're told you folded a sash incorrectly, and the fate of France is now hanging by a wrinkled thread. Your own nerves fray as you begin seeing hats in your dreams, looming over you like stern marshals. You start to envy the old days, when the most dangerous thing about luggage was a rusty hinge. Now, even a stray scuff could become the subject of a government inquest. Meanwhile, trunk envy spreads. Fashionable Parisians begin holding packing parties, where guests compare luggage the way modern neighbours compare lawnmowers or Wi-Fi speeds. Someone inevitably brags about a secret compartment for confidential love letters, Though you suspect most are filled with overdue bills and bitter poems, by the end of the era you realise Napoleon may have conquered Europe, but you conquered the art of packing. You survived the demands, the disasters, and the day someone tried to smuggle a cannonball inside a jewellery box for morale. Every trunk leaving your workshop is not just a suitcase, but a statement. I travel. I matter. And yes, my socks do have their own monogram drawer, and if you've learned anything, it's that history and fashion are both at their most absurd when everyone's running away from something, especially if it's just their in-laws. Travel is booming, but so is luggage theft. You invent locks, secret compartments, and probably a few new cuss words as you discover just how determined rich people are to keep their underwear safe. It's the dawn of a new era. The air smells faintly of coal smoke, wet canvas, and a sort of collective anxiety only experienced by people whose greatest fear is that someone somewhere might wrinkle their cravat. The world is shrinking. Steamships crisscross oceans, trains carve across continents, and for the first time in history, people can be both far from home and still in possession of 12 pairs of monogrammed slippers. You're no longer just a trunk maker, you're a guardian of secrets, shoes, and, on one memorable occasion, a live parrot with anxiety issues. The train station is chaos incarnate. Porters hustle, children wail, and somewhere in the background, a man named Gaston is already regretting bringing 3 hat boxes. Trunks are stacked in teetering towers, each one a fortress of privacy, except the privacy is under siege. Luggage thieves prowl the shadows, armed with nimble fingers and the kind of confidence only available to people who have never tried to return a stolen corset to its rightful owner. You become an innovator out of necessity. The first time a Viscount's socks vanish en route to Nice, you try to brush it off. The second time, you get creative. Soon, your workshop is a laboratory for anti-theft technology. Double-bolted locks, hidden panels, decoy pouches, and trunks within trunks that boggle the mind, and occasionally the owner. You invent secret compartments so cunning that even you forget where you put them. Sometimes you're awoken at midnight by an aristocrat's urgent telegram. Where is the diamond necklace? You consider answering, check under the false bottom, behind the left boot, but you're not actually sure that's where you put it. Travel transforms the very nature of packing. No longer just for nobility on their way to a country estate, trunks now accompany actors, engineers, newlyweds, and, yes, even aspiring luggage thieves who just want a taste of the good life. The social order is upended. Now the best-dressed people on the train are often the ones with the best luggage, not the best bloodlines. You overhear heated debates about the merits of brass versus iron latches, as if the fate of the empire rests on the answer. The stakes are high. One aristocrat writes you a thank you note, on monogrammed stationery of course, after your trunk's triple lock system foils a would-be bandit. Another sends a less friendly letter after discovering you forgot to invent a lock for the trunk containing his pet ferret. Such is life on the cutting edge. Steamships are no easier. You watch, wide-eyed, as luggage is loaded by the ton onto ships bound for America, India, and points unknown. Your trunks sail across oceans, encountering rough seas, bored sailors, and customs officials who have never met a lock they couldn't break with a crowbar. You begin to pad everything, hats, shoes, secret vices, just in case the ship goes down and your client's heirloom cufflinks have to float for it. You develop a unique relationship with your clientele, half admiration, half exasperation. You marvel at their dedication to keeping their underthings safe, but you also secretly wonder if anyone in the entire history of travel has ever needed this many detachable sock pockets. And yet, every innovation feels like progress. You're inventing not just for the rich, but for anyone with somewhere to go and something to lose. By the end of each week, you've lost count of the inventions, the complaints, and the new cuss words muttered under your breath when a trunk comes back from Berlin missing its bottom. But you also sense something else. a strange growing pride. You're not just making luggage, you're building the future of travel, one secret compartment at a time. And if, somewhere out there, a pair of socks remains unstolen, you'll sleep well, at least until the next telegram arrives. You thought monograms were classy. Turns out they're also an excellent way to let pickpockets know which bag is worth stealing. Louis Vuitton's iconic canvas becomes the first status symbol you can't actually eat. It all started with the best of intentions, or so you tell yourself. The monogram was supposed to be the final flourish, a mark of distinction for clients who already considered themselves walking works of art. The logic seemed unassailable. If a hand-stitched trunk was good, a hand-stitched trunk with your initials in elaborate gold script must be better. You weren't just selling luggage. You were selling the idea that one's socks deserved a personalised home. You experiment with different patterns, colours and fonts, settling on the famous interlocking L and V, crowned with tiny flowers and geometric stars. It's bold. It's stylish. It's so obvious that it practically screams, there's something expensive inside. At first, this is considered a triumph. Aristocrats gush over their bespoke trunks, delighted at the chance to humble brag about their customs. Their friends are jealous. Their rivals are furious. The footmen are unimpressed, but you can't win them all. The problems begin almost immediately. You notice that wherever a trunk with a monogram goes, an uncomfortable amount of attention follows. Porters glance a little too long. Street urchins peer at the letters and whisper. Luggage thieves, those connoisseurs of the criminal underworld, begin to specialise. Why steal a plain box when you can target the one with gilded initials, practically a steal me sign in calligraphy? By the second year, you're fielding panicked letters from clients whose trunks have vanished en route to spa towns, honeymoons, and one disastrous diplomatic mission to Brussels. As the legend of the monogram spreads, so does the ambition. Suddenly everyone wants to be seen with one. Not just aristocrats, but rising industrialists, opera singers, and anyone with the right combination of funds and self-regard. You begin to wonder if people are actually travelling anywhere, or if they're just moving luggage back and forth in front of their neighbours' windows. The demand for more elaborate monograms grows. Extra initials, secret codes, sometimes full family crests. The world hasn't seen this much embroidery since the last time someone tried to decorate an entire chateau in pink velvet. Inevitably, counterfeits pop up. Not content to simply steal your bags, thieves now manufacture convincing fakes, selling them from back alleys and suspiciously well-appointed market stalls. Somewhere, a bootlegger is monogramming with such gusto that you half expect to see your own initials on a rival's trunk. You start receiving complaints. Dear Monsieur Vuitton, I purchased a trunk with my monogram and found, horrors, someone else's socks inside. You debate whether to reply or simply forward them a pamphlet about the dangers of optimism. There's a certain irony here. The monogram was meant to deter copycats and elevate the brand. Instead, it becomes the one thing everyone copies. You add ever more elaborate designs, secret stamps, hidden signatures, even cryptic symbols only you and your most trusted craftsman can decipher. Your workshop starts to resemble a codebreaker's den, and every new design is met with a mixture of excitement and deep, existential sighing from the apprentices. Meanwhile, the world can't get enough. People want to be seen. They want to be envied. They want their laundry transported in something that says, yes, I am important enough to pay extra for someone to embroider my undergarment's mobile residence. And you, ever the innovator, keep inventing, knowing full well that with each new flourish you're making someone else's job, the thief's, just a little bit easier. As you walk through the train station, you spot a monogram trunk glinting in the sun, surrounded by admirers and, not coincidentally, a few suspicious characters. The monogram conspiracy has become an arms race. More visibility, more risk, more status, more schemes. But at the end of the day, you have to admire it. The monogram has done the impossible. It's made luggage not just a necessity, but a prize, a target, and an icon. It's the first luxury status symbol that requires its own insurance policy and a small army of watchful eyes. And no, you still can't eat it, but you can sleep at night knowing your initials, at least for now, mean you've made it, even if someone else is planning to make off with it. It's hot, the glue is sticky, there's a rat living behind the wardrobe, and the exclusive leather smells more like panic than privilege. Who knew luxury would involve so much sweating? You imagine the Louis Vuitton workshop as a palace of artistry, a place where Parisian sunlight streams across polished marble, and apprentices are serenaded by a gentle string quartet. In reality, your music is the relentless thud of mallets and the soft, haunting squeak of someone losing a battle with the industrial sewing machine. Your palace is a back room lit by a single grimy window, featuring a floor mosaic of wood shavings, leather scraps, and the occasional mysterious puddle that everyone agrees is best left uninvestigated. Let's talk about the heat. Paris in July turns your little workshop into a sauna with better furniture. The air shimmers with humidity, each breath laced with the tang of glue and the not-so-subtle suggestion that you may never fully wash the smell out of your hair. The boss insists on boiling pots of adhesive from dawn until dusk, sending thick chemical steam curling up to stick to every surface, including your lungs. By lunchtime, you're so lightheaded you're not sure if you're crafting a trunk or hallucinating a beautiful new line of suitcases that double as flotation devices. Luxury materials, let's discuss. The calfskin arrives rolled and smelling like a mix of anxiety and whatever barnyard adventure it went through on the way to Paris. Your job is to stretch it, soften it, and try not to think too hard about that suspicious stain near the edge. Exclusive just means someone's hands, usually yours, have massaged, buffed, and occasionally argued with every square inch of the hide. That artisanal look? It's mostly the result of someone almost burning their fingers with hot wax. If you're lucky, you'll get to trim the leather with the special scissors that everyone swears aren't cursed, despite the fact that every apprentice who's used them ends up with a band-aid and a new appreciation for gloves. The cast of characters in this play is eclectic. There's Henri, who talks to the trunks as he lines them, offering words of encouragement and on bad days thinly veiled threats. Sophie, who claims to be able to smell the difference between new money and old money leather. And of course, your most faithful companion, Maurice the Rat, who's lived behind the wardrobe for so long he might qualify for a pension. He's not just a fixture, he's a motivational speaker, at least on days when he doesn't steal your lunch. The daily grind is both art and ordeal. You measure, cut, and glue with the kind of precision usually reserved for brain surgery. There's no room for error. A crooked stitch means a do-over. A wrinkled lining can cause a minor existential crisis. Or worse, a 10-minute lecture about standards. Sometimes the boss pops in, sniffing the air suspiciously. "Does anyone else smell burning?" he asks, as if the only thing combusting in here isn't your will to live. Breaks are rare and usually spent leaning out the window, gulping slightly fresher air while comparing burn marks and blister tallies with your fellow artisans. Someone inevitably brings up the dream of opening a rival shop, one where the glue is odourless, the rats pay rent, and the only leather is strictly decorative. Then the boss yells, "Back to work!" and the daydream dissolves in a haze of sweat and adhesives. Still, beneath the glue and grime, there's something oddly satisfying. You know the secrets behind the gold leaf. You can tell by touch which hides will shape into flawless luxury, and which will need a lot of persuasion and cursing. For every stifling hour and every ruined shirt, there's the quiet pride of knowing your work is leaving Paris, bound for adventure, or at least a train car with better ventilation than your workshop. So when you see that famous LV label, remember, beneath the shine lies a universe of sticky hands, singed sleeves, and a rat with excellent taste in cheese. That's luxury, kind you have to sweat for. Competition is fierce and only mildly murderous. Other brands hire spies, sabotage trunks, and spread rumours about your glue recipe. Welcome to the original Real Housewives of travel gear. You think the world of high fashion is dramatic? Try working in a Parisian trunk shop in the late 1800s, where the stakes are high, the trunks are higher, and your rivals will literally stoop to anything to win the hearts and wallets of the city's most well-travelled. The city is crawling with luggage makers, each one convinced their secret to success is a particular shade of leather, a family glue recipe handed down by someone's grandmother, or the innovative use of 16 hidden compartments for secrets and snacks. It starts innocently enough. One day you notice a rival's apprentice lingering a little too long near your window display. He claims to be admiring your craftsmanship, but you catch him making notes. Next, a well-dressed customer comes in with far too many questions about your patented stitch and leaves without buying so much as a luggage tag. Soon after, you find a strange powder dusted on your workshop floor. Someone's tried to sabotage your glue. Luckily, you have a rat to test these things on. Maurice, ever the survivor, is unimpressed. Rumours begin to swirl. The shop down the street insists your linings are cheap English felt. Another accuses you of using imitation brass for your locks, spreading the word that Vuitton really means will rust if it rains. A rival craftsman offers to trade you a secret recipe for permanently supple leather if you'll teach him your method for perfectly aligning initials. You suspect this is a trick, but admit you're tempted. Your own formula sometimes smells suspiciously like feet. Brand loyalty is cutthroat. Clients who once swooned over your trunks are suddenly spotted at a competitor's, arms full of suspiciously familiar luggage. The aristocracy gossips about which shop the Empress prefers. You spend evenings trying to guess if your decline in orders is due to last month's glue explosion, or the rumour that you once packed a Viscount's underpants inside out. As the wars escalate, so do the tactics. One morning, you arrive to find someone's left a calling card with a polite note. Nice trunk design. Shame if something happened to it. Another day, your best apprentice returns from running an errand with a new hat and a look that says he's seen things. Things involving secret code words, lockpicking lessons, and an uncomfortably detailed discussion about trunk hinges. In the taverns, rival craftsmen buy each other drinks, but everyone knows it's just an excuse to steal design ideas. You learn to guard your sketches like state secrets. Not even the clients are safe from intrigue. Lady Dufresne, notorious for her shifting allegiances, requests a trunk from you and your bitterest rival, then invites you both to her salon to debate the finer points of luggage construction. You endure 2 hours of passive-aggressive compliments and barely veiled insults before realizing she's only interested in securing a discount. The most outlandish stories, though, are the ones whispered after dark. Tales of midnight break-ins, trunks booby-trapped with itching powder, apprentices bribed with promises of managerial experience, and the occasional bottle of questionable absinthe. You can't be sure which stories are true. You just know every trunk that leaves your shop now has a little extra paranoia stitched into the lining. Through it all, you discover that rivalry is as much a part of the craft as the glue. Sure, it means sleepless nights and the occasional glue sabotage, but it also pushes you to new heights. Your trunks get sturdier, your linings softer, your secret compartments more clever. And every time a rival brand tries to outdo you, you can't help but feel a little smug. After all, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and sabotage is the sincerest form of panic. So you keep building, keep innovating, and keep one eye on the door. Because in the luggage wars of Paris, trust is for amateurs, and every craftsman knows the best revenge is a trunk no one else can open, except, of course, your next apprentice spy. One misaligned stitch and suddenly a Viscount is threatening to duel you. you discover that customer service in the luxury industry is mostly about pretending you care more about their dog than your dignity. Welcome to the daily emotional rollercoaster of luxury retail, where the smallest details become battlegrounds and every aristocrat is a potential lawsuit in silk stockings. You always imagined that serving the upper crust of Paris would mean respect, gratitude, perhaps even a tip in gold coins or a polite round of applause for your perfect luggage seams. Instead, it's a never-ending dance with people whose understanding of difficult has been professionally honed since birth. Every day is an audition. The curtain rises with a noble flinging open your shop door, trailing an entourage of secretaries, footmen, and at least one dog with a better pedigree than your entire family. They never announce themselves. They simply expect you to recognize their presence by the sudden temperature drop and the whiff of expensive cologne mixed with disdain. Their complaints are legendary. One countess claims the scent of the trunk lining clashes with her personal aroma. A baron demands a trunk large enough for all my hats, my walking sticks, and my disappointment. The marquise insists the handle be moved a quarter inch to the left, lest her wrist experience undue strain. You try to keep up, nodding at every request, jotting frantic notes that quickly blur into a mass of question marks and exclamation points. But the real test comes when you deliver the goods. That's when the magnifying glass comes out, literally, in one client's case, and the inspection begins. Each stitch is scrutinized, every compartment opened and closed, opened and closed, opened and closed. This hinge is squeaky, a duke declares. It is the only thing in this room with the courage to speak the truth you don't say out loud. Instead, you offer to oil it, praying he doesn't ask for the entire trunk to be rebuilt in solid gold. If anything, their pets are even more demanding. The Duchess's poodle, Coco, is known to bite ankles that fail to meet her standards. You've spent more time making padded cushions for privileged pets than for actual humans. Once, a parrot requested a secret compartment for his sunflower seeds. Well, the owner did, but the parrot seemed pretty invested. In these moments, you realize that customer service is mostly about convincing people, and their animals, that their happiness matters more to you than breathing clean air. And of course, there are the threats. Aristocrats are nothing if not theatrical. A misaligned monogram, I'll see you in court, a trunk delivered 5 minutes late, my reputation will never recover, an unapproved shade of blue. Do you know who I am? You do, but you're under strict instructions never to say it out loud in case you get it wrong and accidentally insult someone who controls the price of bread. Duels are threatened, letters are written, and occasionally a glove is slapped on your counter in a gesture of outrage so over the top you're tempted to ask if they rehearsed it. There are days when you fantasize about packing yourself into one of the trunks and shipping off to the countryside to live among less demanding clientele, like sheep. But deep down, you know this is part of the game. The more dramatic the complaint, the more delighted the client will be when you miraculously solve their crisis. You become a master of apologies, a connoisseur of the subtle grovel, and a virtuoso at acting like you find these requests totally reasonable. You finish every interaction with a smile that says, "It's my pleasure to serve," even if your soul is quietly screaming. You offer a treat to the dog, a bow to the noble, and a silent prayer to the universe that the next customer has lower standards. Spoiler, they won't. But you survive. Because in the luxury world, dignity is overrated and happy customers, no matter how entitled, always travel with the best stories, most of which, unfortunately, involve you and a poodle named Coco. Every trip is a risk. There's an underworld of professional trunk thieves who can smell a Louis Vuitton from across a train station. You spend half your career outsmarting people who never went to finishing school. Travel is supposed to be glamorous, steamer trunks, first-class tickets, a faint air of champagne and adventure. In reality, it's a high-stakes chess match played against adversaries whose preferred tool is a crowbar and whose only etiquette is finders keepers. Paris's stations are teeming with hopeful travellers, frantic porters, and that one old lady who's always convinced you're after her fruitcake. But somewhere, lurking in the crowd, is a professional thief with a sixth sense for the scent of high-quality leather and a nose for initials painted in real gold. You learn early on that security isn't just about strong locks, it's about psychology. Your average trunk thief is no ordinary pickpocket. They're organised, experienced, and, in many cases, suspiciously well-dressed. The really ambitious ones pose as railway employees, waving a clipboard and a fake badge as they walk away with luggage worth more than the average Parisian's annual rent. You suspect some even rehearse polite small talk, just to keep the mark calm while their socks and social standing disappear forever. Clients turn to you for help, their letters tinged with panic and indignation. "Monsieur, my trunk was stolen on the 2:15 to Marseille. It contained my entire summer wardrobe and at least 3 secrets." You resist the urge to reply, "Congratulations on travelling light," and instead launch into damage control mode. Every missing trunk is an existential crisis, a test of your craftsmanship and your client's willingness to follow basic instructions, like don't hand your luggage to a man named Jean-Claude unless you know his mother. So, you adapt. You become a master of the decoy, creating trunks that are gorgeous on the outside, utterly mundane on the inside, and protected by locks so complex that even you occasionally forget the combination. You invent secret panels, double bottoms, false handles, and, for one particularly paranoid opera singer, a trunk that could only be opened by singing the correct note. It works, but unfortunately, only when she's sober, which is almost never. Still, the thieves evolve too. Just as you perfect your hidden latch system, someone invents a skeleton key. The luggage wars escalate. Trunks are marked with invisible ink, guards are bribed, and clients develop elaborate rituals for blessing their bags before a journey. Some go so far as to hire bodyguards for their luggage, men with more muscles than sense, who spend the entire trip flexing by the baggage car and scaring off only the most timid of pickpockets. Of course, not all threats are so obvious. There are scams so subtle you almost admire them. Porters who swap out a single item leaving the rest untouched. Con artists who offer official trunk insurance in exchange for your best hat. By the time you realise what's missing, you're already halfway to Nice with a trunk full of rocks, a note that says merci, and a growing suspicion that honesty is not the prevailing local currency. As the years go on, you develop a kind of sixth sense. You can spot a thief by the way they linger near the luggage cart, or how their eyes flick to every monogrammed bag in the room. You share tips with other trunk makers, whispering secrets about decoy compartments and client-proof closures. Sometimes, late at night, you wonder who's really winning, the honest craftsman or the nimble-fingered artists who never made a single trunk but always seem to end up with the best ones. In the end, you realise that travel, for all its risks, is just another adventure, a chance to see the world, lose your luggage, and tell stories about the time your entire collection of bespoke neckties ended up in a pawn shop in Vienna. You can't guarantee safety, but you can promise this. Every trunk you make is designed with hope, determination, and a few tricks even the cleverest thief hasn't seen yet. Just remember, if someone offers to watch your bags in a Paris station, make sure you know their mother, or, at the very least, their singing voice. Luxury craftsmanship comes at a price, usually your health. Chronic cough? Blame the varnish. Dizzy spells? Probably the mercury. That's right. The only thing more dangerous than losing a client is breathing in your workshop. From the outside, the world of fine luggage seems scented with lavender and old money. But step behind the curtain, and it's more like eau de solvant and whatever the opposite of osher is. Your day starts with a deep breath of air so thick with chemical vapours, you wonder if you're about to tan a hide or invent a new way to hallucinate. There's a reason every craftsman in the shop has a permanent squint and a mysterious cough that only gets worse when management visits. The glue alone is a wonder of 19th century innovation and a minor public health emergency. On paper, it's made from fish bladders, animal hooves, and whatever else science could boil down in a pot. In reality, it's a cauldron of don't ask, don't inhale. On a hot day, the fumes hit you harder than a 3-day wine festival. By lunchtime, your head is spinning and your sense of smell has retreated in self-defense. Varnish is no kinder. That golden sheen on a trunk, that's the result of hours spent brushing on a syrupy concoction so caustic it could dissolve a small country if spilled. The older craftsmen claim it builds character, and by character they mean a layer of sticky residue on your lungs that won't wash off, even if you tried. Everyone's hands are stained, everyone's apron is pockmarked, and at least 3 people are convinced their moustaches used to be brown before the varnish worked its magic. Mercury, meanwhile, is the secret ingredient nobody talks about, except in the quietest of whispers or after the 3rd glass of afterwork absinthe. It's used to treat some of the finer leathers and add an extra gloss that aristocrats demand and doctors dread. You quickly learn to handle these hides with gloves, and not just because you're tired of explaining your mystery rash to the local apothecary. The senior apprentice, Jean, swears he hasn't slept through the night since 1848 and claims his dreams glow faintly in the dark. There are other hazards too. Dyes that promise a rich royal blue but leave your fingers a shade you can only describe as ghastly, and a faint tingle in your arms that doesn't go away after lunch. Cleaning agents that take the shine off silver and possibly a few IQ points if you linger too long. Even the humble protective wax is just beeswax mixed with something that probably shouldn't be flammable but is. There's an unspoken competition among the crew. Who can work the longest without fainting? Who can go the most weeks without an unexplained rash, dizzy spell, or a coughing fit that sends the boss running for fresh air? You all swap remedies, lavender poultices, onion soup, and, in one desperate case, a bucket of rainwater poured straight over the head. It didn't help the rash, but it did distract from the glue headache. Yet somehow, through the haze of solvents and sneezing fits, the work gets done. The trunks leave the shop gleaming, perfectly stitched. The picture of Parisian luxury. No client ever suspects the price you paid was counted in nights lost to insomnia and afternoons spent staring blankly at the wall, wondering if your eyebrows used to be this singed. But you don't complain, at least not too loudly. There's a strange pride in knowing that luxury, for all its glamour, is built on calloused hands and the willingness to risk it all for a perfect shine. Just remember, next time you see a suitcase sparkling under the station lights, it's not just craftsmanship you're admiring, it's also the collective immune system of a workshop that's braver than it is sensible. And if you ever get that rash, don't worry. In the world of luxury luggage, it's practically a badge of honour. There's a rumour that your boss once bribed a customs officer, and maybe another that the monogram pattern was borrowed from a rival. The luxury world's dirtiest secret. Everyone steals something, eventually. Whispers travel faster than luggage on a conveyor belt, especially in Paris, where the air is thick with perfume and even thicker with intrigue. In the workshop, scandal is as much a part of daily life as glue fumes and questionable pastries. You hear it in the way apprentices lower their voices when the boss walks by, or how the local baker winks as he hands you a croissant, as if to say, "I know what you did," or at least I know what I heard you did, which is almost as good. Start with a customs officer. The story goes that Monsieur Vuitton, tired of watching his finest trunks linger at the border, while customs agents poked, prodded, and occasionally sampled the contents, decided to expedite the process with a well-timed envelope. Was it money, tickets to the opera, a trunk full of extra gloves? No one knows for sure. What they do know is that after that day, Vuitton luggage sailed through checkpoints with a speed that defied logic and possibly legality. Of course, your boss denies everything. All lies, he says, as he polishes a lock that seems just a bit shinier than usual. But the evidence mounts. Trunks that cross borders without so much as a stamp. Clients who swear their luggage was never even opened. The more he protests, the juicier the gossip becomes. You learn quickly that in luxury, the fastest way to spread a rumour is to loudly deny it in front of your most gossipy customer. Then there's the monogram conspiracy. The tale goes that the iconic LV canvas wasn't an original at all, but a clever adaptation, some would say outright theft, of a lesser-known design belonging to a rival shop. You can practically feel the tension whenever another trunk maker walks past your window, squinting suspiciously at your latest pattern. In Paris, design borrowing is almost a tradition. Some say it's flattery, others call it fraud, but most agree that if your pattern is being copied, at least someone thinks it's worth stealing. Scandal, of course, is not reserved for your shop alone. There are whispers that other trunk makers have slipped love letters into aristocrats' luggage, forged royal signatures for special discounts, or hidden less-than-legal merchandise in secret compartments for a fee. One infamous competitor is rumoured to have built a trunk so heavy with contraband that it required 4 porters, 2 bribes, and a blind priest to get it through customs. In this world, everyone's playing the same game. How much can you get away with before someone calls your bluff? The real challenge is knowing which rumours are true. Did the rival shop really pay off a policeman to sabotage your last delivery? Was that countess's trunk lined with fabric acquired from the empress's own tailor? Why do you keep finding half-empty wine bottles in the lining room? And what happened to last week's order of Italian leather that mysteriously reappeared with a suspicious tan? You become an expert at reading between the lines, listening to the half-truths, and mastering the art of plausible deniability. It's a skill as essential as sewing a straight seam or picking the right lock. You develop a sixth sense for drama, the ability to smile politely as a client hints that they know things, and to nod wisely when a rival accuses you of crimes you're only guilty of in their imagination. Yet for all the secrecy, there's a kind of camaraderie to it all. In the smoky back rooms of Paris, over cheap coffee and expensive biscuits, trunk makers swap stories. Everyone has a scandal to confess, a rival to blame, and a memory of the time they almost got caught. Sometimes you wonder if the real luxury is not in the luggage, but in the stories you collect along the way. Because in the end, everyone in the business is a little bit thief, a little bit artist, and a little bit legend, whether their initials are stamped in gold or whispered in rumour. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real secret behind every luxury trunk. No one ever asks who actually sews the handles. You do, by candlelight, for hours, with fingers permanently scented like wet cow. There are no days off in the luxury game, only different degrees of exhaustion. Your name isn't embossed in gold, but your handiwork is everywhere. The elite strut through Parisian train stations, their luggage gleaming and monogrammed, and somewhere inside your stitches are holding everything together. You work in the shadows, quite literally, since the best light you can get is a flickering candle that threatens to sputter out just as you're finishing the trickiest part of a seam. Every evening, as Paris glitters outside, you're hunched over a workbench, squinting to thread a needle that's been bent by sheer frustration. The workshop isn't glamorous. It's a maze of benches, battered stools, and scraps of leather so soft and fine they ought to have come with their own apology note. You share the space with fellow craftspeople, a family of perpetual exhaustion. Marie, who can sew a perfect straight line with her eyes closed. Jacques, who hasn't smiled since 1847. And Henriette, whose coffee is strong enough to dissolve your worries and the occasional bit of leftover varnish. Your fingers are your tools, and they bear the scars to prove it. Calluses form where needles slip, Blisters bloom where rough edges rub, and no matter how hard you try, the smell of tanned hide seems to seep into your skin, your hair, even your dreams. Your sense of time is measured by how many handles you've sewn, how many seams you've knotted, and how many times you've muttered, "Just this one more," as the candle burns low. Luxury, you discover, is built on repetition. It's not the first stitch that matters, but the 100th, the 1000th, the one you make when your hands ache, your eyes blur, and you're wondering if anyone, anywhere, will ever notice the extra care you took not to let a single thread fray. There are no holidays, not really. If the aristocrats are travelling, so are you, at least in spirit, hunched over a pile of last-minute rush orders because someone's cousin decided to elope and needed a matching trunk by morning. You talk with your co-workers in a language of sighs, shared glances, and the occasional burst of laughter when someone accidentally sews their sleeve to a suitcase. You trade stories about clients' bizarre requests, about the time someone ordered a handle with their family crest and then sent it back because the cowhide was insufficiently cheerful. At the end of a long night, you share stale bread and memories of a time before monograms, when luggage was just a box and not a lifestyle. But beneath the exhaustion, there's a stubborn pride. You know that without your steady hands there would be no glamorous travel, no parade of perfectly packed trunks gliding down marble hallways. You make things that last. You test every seam, pull every handle, and whisper encouragement to the stubborn bits of leather that refuse to cooperate. You watch trunks leave the workshop and hope, just a little, that someone will admire the stitching, even if they never wonder who did it. When morning comes and Paris wakes to another day of bustle, you're already deep into your next project. Your hands move by instinct, your mind drifts to dreams of a softer bed, but your heart, whether you admit it or not, takes quiet pleasure in the knowledge that you, the invisible underclass, are the backbone of every bag, the ghost behind every gleaming clasp. So the next time someone boasts about their designer luggage, let them. You'll smile, flex your tired hands, and know that real luxury isn't in the label, but in the countless hours, candlelit nights, and secret pride stitched into every seam. With success comes infighting. Now, it's not just about sewing perfect seams, it's about surviving your in-laws, your siblings, and the occasional threatened lawsuit over inheritance. At first, it all seems so simple. Make beautiful trunks, become a household name, live happily ever after. The reality. Every dynasty comes with a small print clause, family not included in warranty. As the Vuitton fortune grows, so do the tangled roots of the family tree, and you quickly discover that monogrammed luggage is the easy part. The hard part is navigating dinner conversations where even the soup is suspicious. It starts with little things. Who gets credit for the signature trunk clasp? Who accidentally glued Uncle Henri's moustache to a steamer lid? Small spats erupt over design choices and escalate, as only family drama can, into full-blown debates about whose turn it is to stoke the workshop fire, or who's been hoarding the good leather scraps. At first, you think these squabbles are just passionate artistic differences. Soon, you realise everyone is keeping a running tally, real or imagined, of slights, triumphs, and perceived betrayals. The business itself becomes a sprawling, bustling hive. Brothers, cousins, nieces, and even that mysterious family friend who only appears around bonus season. The family home is equal parts castle and war zone. It's hard to say which is more dangerous, a botched stitching job, or Great Aunt Estelle cornering you in the pantry to grill you about your loyalty to the brand. Meetings are theatrical. No agenda survives contact with the family. There's the brother who insists on new colours. Burgundy is the future. The cousin who claims to have invented the monogram despite being 7 years old when it launched. And the aunt who, despite never having set foot in the workshop, offers strong opinions about the aura of calfskin. You learn to smile, nod, and back away slowly whenever a heated debate about lining fabric turns into a referendum on someone's marriage. With money and fame comes the very French tradition of the family feud. Inheritance is a game for the bold and the slightly unhinged. "My father promised me the workshop," says one nephew. "He promised me the patent," insists another. Lawyers become regular guests at family gatherings, wielding legal documents like baguettes, and always angling for a slice of the action. If you ever doubted that a trunk full of secrets could spark a revolution, you've never seen what happens when the annual dividend check goes missing. Yet beneath the drama, the dynasty marches on. Rivalries keep everyone sharp. Nothing motivates like the threat of being disinherited over a crooked lock. Even as lawsuits fly and uncles refuse to speak to each other over a dispute about luggage handles, the family name grows more powerful. Vuitton becomes not just a brand, but a legend, whispered in salons and train stations across Europe. Ironically, it's the feuds that make the dynasty stronger. After all, nothing says timeless quite like a product line that survived 3 generations of bickering relatives and one actual duel over a hat box. On rare, peaceful days, you all remember why you started. The satisfaction of crafting something perfect. The pride in seeing your name cross the world on a trunk's brass plate. The laughter, yes, laughter, when someone accidentally glues themselves to the shop floor. The family that squabbles together, it turns out, also innovates together. Every new design, every bold idea, is shaped as much by heated arguments as by genuine genius. So you keep stitching, keep arguing, and keep a weather eye out for errant in-laws and overly ambitious cousins. You know that behind every great dynasty is a family portrait just out of frame, someone smiling, someone scowling, and someone definitely hiding the silver. Because in the end, surviving the Vuitton legacy means learning to embroider your initials not just on luggage, but on family history itself. And if you can make it through the next family meeting without a legal summons, you can survive anything, even the most complicated luggage order Paris has to offer. You think runway models are ruthless? Try negotiating with a countess who wants her initials in gold, but only if it matches her favourite poodle. Welcome to the high-stakes game of taste. The salons of Paris are buzzing, not just with gossip about the latest hemline, but with the deadly serious art of accessorizing. It's no longer enough to arrive at the opera in a designer gown. Your luggage, too, must whisper, "I have more taste and money than you, and possibly a better dog." Every piece is a statement, every colour a political gambit, and every monogram a badge in a war where the only casualty is your sanity. You're thrust into the front lines, arms loaded with swatches and samples, as the city's elite summon you for private consultations. The Countess, resplendent in silks and a haze of very expensive perfume, greets you with a languid wave. "I adore gold," she purrs, "but it must be the exact shade as Monsieur Pompon's fur." Monsieur Pompon, a poodle with more social clout than your entire extended family, regards you with the icy scrutiny of someone who knows their influence and their palate. You scramble to match golds, only to be told that last week's gold is simply passé. Silver is for widows, navy is for the navy, and crimson, while once her favourite, has recently been banned from her wardrobe due to an unfortunate incident with a tomato and a duke. You soon realise that fashion is less about creating something beautiful and more about navigating a minefield of personal vendettas, fleeting obsessions, and social pecking orders that make your workshop's rat hierarchy look refreshingly simple. This isn't just business, it's politics. Each aristocrat's luggage is a campaign, and your reputation is at stake with every stitch. The wrong colour could start a salon feud. The wrong font could prompt a letter to the editor of Paris's most notorious society rag. You become an expert in diplomacy, learning to nod empathetically when a duchess insists that last year's trunk ruined her entire season, or when a viscount threatens to switch ateliers unless his lining is as smooth as a gondolier's serenade. Negotiations can drag on for hours. The most powerful clients use their pets' reactions as the final word. If Pompon sneezes, the sample is rejected. If Pompon yawns, you're instructed to try something livelier. There is, you discover, a secret language to high fashion, where a raised eyebrow is a death sentence and a well-timed sigh signals cautious approval. Your own taste? Irrelevant. Your job is to anticipate the whims of Paris's tastemakers, preferably before they know them themselves. You occasionally find yourself embroiled in actual espionage. Rival couturiers send spies to steal your trunk patterns, or bribe your assistants for the latest colour chart. Once, you catch a would-be fashion spy disguised as a florist, taking notes in the corner as the Countess debates pom-pom placement with the poodle. You chase him off with a glare and a handful of rejected leather scraps, secretly pleased your work is considered important enough to steal. Of course, it's not all power struggles and intrigue. There are moments of triumph, a gasp of delight when the gold finally matches, a grateful smile when you've managed to rescue a design from certain scandal. These moments, rare as they are, make it almost worth the sleepless nights spent worrying whether chartreuse is in or out, and whether next season's must-have is going to be saffron, sunset, or whatever Pompon rolls in at the park. You learn to keep your sense of humour, your wits, and a secret stash of neutral-coloured samples for emergencies, because at the end of the day, Paris fashion isn't really about style, it's about survival. And if you can survive a poodle-led colour consultation, you can survive anything, even the spring collection. If imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, you should feel honoured. Instead, you're just exhausted from chasing street vendors who have perfected the knockoff before you even finish the real thing. It's the eternal dilemma of luxury. You pour your soul and a decent chunk of your life expectancy into crafting the perfect trunk, only to find your masterpiece reproduced at warp speed and sold for a handful of coins in some smoky Parisian alley. You're not just fighting for your reputation, you're fighting against an entire underground industry that runs on hope, glue, and a criminal disregard for the rules of embroidery. It starts innocently enough. A client returns from a holiday in Nice, fanning herself dramatically and declaring, "Everyone is carrying your trunks." Except not quite. She presents you with an imitation so convincing that for a moment, even you wonder if you made it. The stitches are just a bit off, the leather's a little too crunchy, and the monogram instead of LV reads LU-IV, or in one inspired case, LOUISVIUTTON in Comic Sans. Still, to the untrained eye, and apparently to a shocking number of trained ones, these fakes pass muster. You try to console yourself with the idea that only the most successful brands are worth counterfeiting. But the truth is less flattering. The knockoff artists aren't just good, they're fast, entrepreneurial, and seemingly immune to shame. You design a new clasp, and by the end of the week, it's already being hawked at the street market, alongside questionable sausages and genuine silk scarves that dissolve in the rain. The fight against fakes becomes a part-time job. You develop secret stamps, hidden signatures, and elaborate patterns that can't easily be duplicated, at least not until the counterfeiters recruit someone with a steady hand and poor moral compass. Every innovation is met with a new wave of copies, some clever, some hilariously off the mark. There's still an old trunk in the workshop that claims to be Lavis Vuitton, and you keep it as a cautionary tale. You enlist the help of the police, only to find they're usually more interested in securing a discount on their next trunk than in actually arresting anyone. Lawyers are dispatched, cease and desist letters fly, but for every counterfeit operation you shut down, 2 more pop up behind a bakery or under a suspiciously well-stocked bridge. The city's knockoff merchants are as slippery as the glue on their products. Meanwhile, the public can't get enough. For every loyal customer who insists on the real thing, there are a dozen more who don't mind a slightly wonky logo if it means their neighbours will seethe with envy. The demand for imitation luxury is so high, You start to wonder if you could simply switch to selling fakes yourself and retire by 40. You don't, but it's tempting. The copycat culture spreads. Soon, rivals are not just counterfeiting your trunks, but also your catalogues, your window displays, even your staff uniforms. You catch one vendor trying to sell an exclusive monogram trunk to your own apprentice, who honestly seems a bit flattered by the attention. You realise it's not just your designs under attack, but the very concept of originality itself. Through it all, you find moments of humour. There's something oddly touching about the creativity of the counterfeits. A secret compartment that accidentally locks itself. A handle made from a single, very brave carrot. A lining stitched together from opera programs and old lottery tickets. You develop a grudging respect for the ingenuity, even as you plot your next move in the never-ending game of one-upmanship. In the end, you realise that the art of the fake is as old as fashion itself. You keep creating, keep inventing, and keep checking the market stalls for your own designs in disguise. It's exhausting, infuriating, and if you're honest, a little bit flattering after all. Just don't tell the street vendors. They'll have a knockoff of your pride ready by morning. When Europe goes to war, so do the luxury brands. Trunks are now for hiding jewellery, secrets, and the occasional questionable passport. The black market's best-kept secret. Everyone wants a Vuitton. You always imagined war would bring a certain seriousness to the business. Instead, it brings opportunity, the kind that's equal parts lucrative and illegal. The city is full of tension and telegrams, but also of whispered deals and people who suddenly need an extra compartment, just big enough for never mind what. At first, you think it's just nerves. Then you realise wartime Paris is a trunk maker's wildest dream and most elaborate headache. Your shop becomes a crossroads for the anxious and the enterprising. Wealthy clients sidle in with furrowed brows, eyes darting, insisting on double-lining secret panels and reinforced locks in case of emergencies. Emergencies, you soon discover, now include smuggling family heirlooms, coded letters, or occasionally an entire roast chicken past the ration inspectors. You learn to ask fewer questions and to perfect your poker face. Certainly, madame, the trunk is now equipped with an herb compartment, just as you requested. As borders close and armies advance, trunks become the currency of survival. One week you're crafting a case for a countess who needs to relocate her jewels somewhere the Germans won't look. The next, you're installing false bottoms for a diplomat with a suspicious number of official passports. You're not entirely sure if you're helping the resistance or just someone's second cousin escape alimony payments, but either way, you're paid in cash, chocolate, and the sort of favours that keep you awake at night. Black market operators become your unofficial business partners. They pay in gold coins, contraband cigarettes, and the vague promise of protection, which mostly means your shop is only robbed once a month instead of twice. One day, you're asked to design a trunk for the opera's leading soprano. The next, you're hiding codebooks in the lining for a man with more aliases than shirts. Trunks go missing en route, only to turn up 6 months later stuffed with military uniforms, silk stockings, or, once, an alarming number of onions. You stop trying to keep inventory. If it leaves the shop, it's out of your hands and possibly out of the country. Wartime also brings a new clientele. Desperate, cunning, and not especially patient. Soldiers, spies, and the occasional master forger line up with requests for unbreakable locks, soundproof panels, and the kind of craftsmanship that can withstand a customs inspection from a man whose hobby is smashing trunks with a crowbar. You invent new closures, decoy handles, and, on one memorable occasion, a trunk that chirps like a canary if someone tampers with it. Security, you say, is also a state of mind. Despite the danger, business booms. The right trunk can save a life, end a marriage, or simply smuggle a bottle of Bordeaux to a lonely outpost. Stories circulate about Vuitton trunks hidden behind false walls, or spirited out of the city by clever porters with suspiciously well-packed lunchboxes. Your workshop becomes a hub of rumour, ingenuity, and the distinct aroma of risk. But the war leaves scars. You lose clients to bombings, borders, or the simple fact that sometimes no amount of hidden compartments can keep you safe from history. You learn to work quickly, trust rarely, and treasure the odd frantic thanks scribbled on a postcard months after the fact. And when the dust settles, you realise the Vuitton trunk has become more than luggage. It's a symbol of survival, a portable safe, a ticket out, a vessel for hope, and maybe a small roast chicken. The black market will move on, but the legend of the wartime trunk remains, quiet, sturdy, and packed with secrets nobody will ever admit to owning. Just as well. The less you know, the better you sleep, and the more securely you can stitch the next secret into someone's future. You learn that no matter how beautiful the bag, someone will always complain. Turns out, the one thing luxury can't buy is a good mood, or immunity from spilled soup. The curse of crafting for the wealthy is that you become an unwilling expert in the anatomy of discontent. The richer the client, the longer the list of grievances. You can sew the perfect seam, line the trunk in silk and emboss their initials with gold leaf, but it's never enough. The handle is too stiff, the zipper too zippy. The colour, once described as the very breath of elegance, suddenly reminds them of an unfortunate childhood spent near mustard. Welcome to the front row seat at the never-ending production of the world's most glamorous pity party. Luxury, it turns out, is not a happiness vaccine. Your clients glide through marble train stations with enough luggage to supply a small army, and still manage to find something to sulk about by the second stop. You've witnessed meltdowns over luggage tags, existential crises about whether one's travel blanket looks continental, and a 5-day Cold War between a countess and her daughter after someone's trunk was mispacked with the wrong gloves, white for daytime, ivory for scandal. Sometimes you wonder if the very existence of luxury is the source of their woes. When you have everything, what's left but to look for imperfections? The Count buys a new trunk and immediately laments, "I suppose it will be out of fashion in a week." The Baroness demands extra compartments, then complains there's nowhere for spontaneity. You try to explain that spontaneity is difficult to design into a leather trunk, but she just waves you away, convinced that someone, somewhere, is hoarding all the good surprises. And then there's the food. For reasons known only to the universe and the world's best dry cleaners, rich people are magnets for disaster, especially when soup is involved. No matter how many waterproof linings or stain-resistant pouches you add, someone will inevitably upend a tureen of bouillabaisse right onto their favourite monogram. You've watched a Viscount nearly faint when his lobster bisque seeped into his shoe case, and listened to a marquise insist that her caviar tastes of travel, which translated means it fell out of the trunk and rolled under a train seat in Calais. You start to see a pattern. The more elaborate the luggage, the more fragile the mood. It's as if every extra pocket, every secret compartment, is just another place to store grievances. You hear about missed trains, delayed carriages, the rain in Biarritz, and the unbearable trauma of a slightly squashed macaron. No complaint is too small. Why can't you make a trunk that irons clothes while I travel? Does the lock have to make that noise when it clicks? Could you invent a lining that doesn't wrinkle my aura? As you listen, you realise you've become part therapist, part craftsman. Your true service isn't in the stitching or the monograms, but in offering a listening ear and a sympathetic nod, sometimes while discreetly patching a tear caused by a tantrum over lukewarm tea. And yet, for all the melodrama, there's something oddly comforting in the constancy of their complaints. It's a reminder that even those with the best luggage can't escape the messiness of life. Soup will spill, handles will crack, someone will always want a different shade of blue. The Vuitton curse, you conclude, is not in the trunk, but in the eternal truth that happiness can't be bought, only carried, sometimes badly. So you keep stitching, keep nodding, and when asked, design a meltdown-proof compartment, knowing full well that the only thing it'll ever hold is the next perfectly packaged disappointment. A clever ad man convinces the world they need a steamer trunk for trips they'll never take. Overnight, your job is to make boredom look exclusive and necessity sound romantic. There's a moment in every luxury business when reality gives way to fantasy, and fantasy gives way to profit margins. Enter the age of marketing magic, where the only thing more powerful than a well-crafted trunk is the story you tell about it. Suddenly it's not about what the trunk does, but what it promises: sophistication, adventure, and a guarantee that you're not just anyone. You're someone who owns a Louis Vuitton. It begins with a whisper in the right salon. A journalist remarks that a certain trunk is simply indispensable for every modern voyageur. Within a week, the same phrase appears in every ladies' magazine, sandwiched between tips for avoiding sunburn and a recipe for aspic of the season. The public listens. After all, if society says you need a steamer trunk, well, what are you going to do? Travel with a basket like some kind of peasant? The clever ad man knows his audience. His campaign is a study in aspiration. He paints word pictures of impossibly glamorous journeys, moonlit train rides, champagne at the Riviera, exotic ports of call. Never mind that most clients are just heading to Aunt Lucille's in Lyon. In the ads, every trunk is photographed atop a spotless platform surrounded by models who look like they've never carried anything heavier than a glass of sherry. A steamer trunk is no longer storage. It's a ticket to a better life, or at the very least better envy from your neighbours. Necessity itself becomes a luxury. You're told that to be modern, you must own luggage that organises your silk stockings, polishes your shoes, and keeps your secrets safe behind brass locks. You invent compartments for everything: jewellery, ties, hairbrushes, pet frogs. Don't ask. One particularly enthusiastic client insists on a trunk within a trunk for when I travel light. You nod, smile, and try to figure out how to engineer a box that won't collapse under the weight of its own irony. Boredom becomes exclusive. Rest assured, the ad man croons, your journey will never be dull with a Louis Vuitton. What he doesn't mention is that most journeys involve endless waiting, bad train food, and the slow realization that you forgot to pack your toothbrush. But your trunk looks good. That's what matters. You overhear society matrons boasting not about where they're going, but about how beautifully their new trunk sits in the hallway, perfectly untouched. A man who's never left Paris orders 2 steamer trunks for appearances. They remain unopened, but the invitations to dinner roll in. Coincidence? He thinks not. Romance too is repackaged. An ad promises a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single trunk. Couples buy matching sets, convinced it will save their marriage. Spoiler, it doesn't. But it does give them something expensive to fight about on the platform at Calais. Children beg for miniature versions, not because they travel, but because the idea of adventure is almost as good as adventure itself, especially when it comes with gold initials. You find yourself working overtime not to keep up with actual travel, but to keep up with the fantasy. Orders pour in from people who have never left Paris, but who simply must have the newest model just in case. Luggage becomes less about utility and more about performance, the act of being seen with the right trunk in the right place, even if the only journey is from the bedroom to the sitting room and back. In the end, the real magic isn't in the marketing, it's in how everyone, from Duchess to doorman, comes to believe the story. The trunk itself becomes a vessel not just for clothes, but for dreams. And that, the ad man will tell you, is the greatest journey of all. Ever been asked to design a trunk that holds exactly 1 live peacock? How about a mobile tea room? The customer is always right, especially when they're this eccentric or rich. You'd think, after years in the luxury game, you'd seen it all. Spoiler, you haven't. The truly affluent have a knack for dreaming up requests that defy logic, physics, and occasionally the Geneva Conventions. The ordinary steamer trunk, sturdy, practical, dignified, isn't nearly enough. Not when someone is preparing for a picnic on the Nile, a diplomatic mission to Vienna, or just a weekend in the countryside with 7 dogs, all of whom have their own dietary restrictions and, yes, monogrammed collars. You get your first taste of madness with the caviar case. A baroness, apparently worried that her fish eggs might socialise with her pâté, insists on a trunk with a refrigerated compartment just for caviar, darling. You spend weeks sourcing iceboxes, lining tiny drawers with velvet, and inventing a cooling system involving 3 footmen and a rotating shift with fans. The Baroness is delighted. The footmen are less so, and you suspect the caviar has unionised. That, it turns out, is just the beginning. The live peacock order arrives via scented letter. The client, a duke known for his theatrical entrances, requests a trunk of generous size, properly ventilated, so the bird arrives in full plumage, not in full panic. You draft designs with air holes, padded perches, and a discreet compartment for bird snacks. The end result looks like a cross between a birdcage and a royal carriage. The peacock, upon delivery, gives you a look that suggests you'll never be invited to its next birthday party. Some requests are small but mighty. A duchess demands a mobile tea room, complete with cup hooks, saucer slots, and a hidden drawer for her scandalous stash of cinnamon biscuits. You build it, an unfolding marvel of hinges, panels, and secret compartments, engineered so precisely that a single wrong turn sends scones tumbling everywhere. She writes you a thank you note. My guests were astonished. Also, mildly concussed. Then comes the coffin. No, really. A marquis of uncertain health wants a travel trunk that can double as a coffin, should the journey prove too exciting. You nod solemnly, draw up plans, and end up constructing a trunk so elegant you're briefly tempted to test it yourself, just to escape the next ridiculous commission. The Marquis loves it. He takes it on every trip, and you begin to suspect he enjoys the morbid attention more than the trunk itself. There are orders for perfume safes, cheese humidors, secret card tables, and even a petite bibliothèque for a novelist who insists she cannot write unless her favourite books travel beside her, wrapped in silk. You puzzle over blueprints, mutter to yourself about lost career opportunities, and keep the coffee flowing. Every new design tests your patience, your sanity, and the limits of your apprenticeship in physics. The truly astonishing thing is how normal these clients seem at first glance. They walk in with perfect posture and polished shoes, quietly making demands that would make a circus manager flinch. They expect miracles, and by midnight, with enough glue, you usually deliver them. When people ask what it's like to serve the world's wealthiest travellers, you smile and say, every day is an adventure. Sometimes it's even true, because at the end of it all, after the feathers, the tea sets, the caviar, and the occasional coffin, you get to send something out into the world that, for at least one brief, absurdly specific moment, was exactly what someone needed. And you, against all odds, were the only person on Earth who could build it. Louis Vuitton conquers America, and you're suddenly trying to explain Parisian elegance to people who think berets are edible. The culture shock is mutual and mildly traumatic. You always pictured the march of French luxury as a stately affair, steamer trunks rolling down marble gangplanks, Parisian taste gliding effortlessly into new worlds. Reality, as usual, is a little less romantic. The first shipment of Vuitton trunks hits the new world with all the subtlety of a brass band at a wine tasting. Suddenly you're not just a craftsman, you're an ambassador, a translator, and on bad days, a crisis negotiator for the lost-in-translation mishaps of international chic. American clients, flush with optimism and a vague sense that Paris is code for fancier than Boston, are eager for a taste of old-world glamour. they're also eager for practical features. Can I get one with cup holders? Is this trunk waterproof, snowproof, and barbecue sauce proof? My Aunt Gertrude travels with 5 poodles. Can you make it fur resistant? Explaining the concept of a monogram as an heirloom instead of just an expensive stencil becomes your new part-time job. In your Parisian workshop, you field telegraphs and handwritten letters with requests for trunks as seen in the Gazette, but in Navy with extra compartments for fishing tackle. Some Americans send their measurements in inches, others in roughly the size of my cousin's footlocker. You take notes, drink more coffee than you should, and begin sketching what you think a travel trunk for camping and cotillions would look like. Hint: it's confusing, and it might be illegal in 3 states. But the real challenge isn't logistics, it's sensibility. American style, it turns out, is less timeless restraint and more maximalist energy drink. Where Parisians prize subtlety, a whisper of gold, a signature lock, Americans want size, shine, and a little more razzle-dazzle if you don't mind. You try to explain the concept of elegant understatement. They counter with a request for trunks that double as dance floors and, if possible, open to reveal a hidden icebox. The reverse culture shock is just as real. Stories drift back to Paris of Vuitton trunks used as ice chests at barn dances, a monogrammed wardrobe case employed as a lemonade stand, and one particularly resourceful heiress who fit 3 trunks on a single jalopy, declaring it a portable Paris. You can't decide if you're horrified, impressed, or just deeply, deeply confused. Through it all, your legend grows. American celebrities begin to appear in newspapers posing beside their trunks, which sometimes outshine the actual celebrities. Vuitton becomes shorthand for "I have arrived," even if you're only arriving at your own birthday party with a trunk full of party hats and questionable fireworks. The New York elite clamour for limited editions, and soon you're sending trunks with silver fittings and secret bourbon compartments, purely for medicinal purposes, of course. Yet despite the chaos, something extraordinary happens. French craftsmanship, that mixture of patience, artistry, and stubbornness, endures. Your trunks withstand the rigours of cross-country trains, Atlantic steamers, and curious raccoons. Americans, with their boundless energy and total disregard for tradition, begin to appreciate the subtleties of Parisian luxury, sometimes, occasionally, on weekends. And as often happens in history, the blending of cultures produces something unexpected, a new version of forever. Parisian elegance, American enthusiasm, trunks that survive picnics, cotillions, and the occasional bear attack. Suddenly, you're not just a part of French history, you're part of a global story. Your work carries the echoes of 2 continents, the faint scent of leather, a hint of adventure, and maybe, just maybe, a smear of barbecue sauce in the corner. Because when French becomes forever, you learn to celebrate the unpredictable and pack a little extra patience in the lining just in case. You want to join the inner circle? First, you must survive the annual glue-sniffing contest and recite the monogram backwards at midnight. Or maybe that's just another rumour. Hard to say. Every great house has its secrets, and Vuitton is no exception. The official story is all hard work, craftsmanship, and family pride. But ask any apprentice who's lasted more than a fortnight, and you'll hear whispers about what really goes on after hours. Initiation, they call it, part bonding, part rite of passage, part outright test of survival, in a world where burnt fingertips and singed eyebrows are just part of the process. Your first day in the workshop, you notice that the veterans keep to themselves, speaking in hushed tones and sharing glances whenever a newcomer fumbles with the leather punch. You try to ignore it, but as dusk falls and the glue fumes begin to reach hallucinatory, the laughter starts. There are stories, always stories, of how the true Vuitton craftsman is revealed not in daylight, but at the annual gathering known only as the midnight marking. Details are murky. Some say it starts with the oldest employee lighting a candle using the original trunk maker's fire, supposedly preserved since the shop's founding, or more likely last Tuesday. The apprentices gather in a circle, hands sticky, eyes wide, as the foreman produces a battered centuries-old mallet, the mallet of destiny. Tradition demands that each new recruit prove their worth by hammering in a brass tack using only their non-dominant hand, all while balancing on one foot and reciting Louis Vuitton, Louis Vuitton, Louis Vuitton, until someone laughs or falls over. Both outcomes are acceptable. Then there's the legendary glue-sniffing contest. To outsiders it sounds dangerous and mildly illegal. To insiders it's mostly a test of who can stand closest to the open glue pot before their nose surrenders or their vision goes pleasantly blurry. Whoever lasts the longest is crowned le roi de la colle, king or queen of the glue, and receives the honour of cleaning out the glue pot at the end of the shift. Some honour. Of course, that's just the warm-up. The real test is the recitation. At the stroke of midnight, under the wary gaze of the shop's resident rat, still Maurice despite rumours of his retirement, the apprentices are led to the darkest corner of the workroom. Here, they must recite the monogram backwards, Noittuovsiul, without stumbling. If they succeed, they're welcomed into the fold with a celebratory toast of questionable cognac and a key to the secret supply closet, which mostly contains old rags and 2.5 bottles of expired leather conditioner. Some claim there's more. Rumours swirl about a secret handshake involving a strip of calfskin and a wink, or a hidden chamber where the oldest craftsman sits, whispering the company's greatest secrets. How to align a seam by candlelight, where to hide your lunch from Henriette, and why you never ever borrow the foreman's scissors. None of this appears in the training manual. Officially, the only initiation is a stern lecture on punctuality and the safe handling of sharp objects. But ask anyone who's been around for more than one Christmas party, and they'll tell you. The glue sniffing, the monogram recitation, and the late-night laughter are what separate the true family from the rest. And in the end, as you trudge home at dawn, head spinning from glue fumes and half-remembered toasts, you realise you've become part of something bigger than yourself. Not just a workshop, but a weird, wonderful society where the greatest secret isn't how to make the perfect trunk. It's how to survive the journey, together, one absurd ritual at a time. A true crime story. When half the trunks for a royal wedding vanish, you become both suspect and detective. Spoiler, the real culprit was probably boredom, or a rival with a grudge. It should have been the event of the season, a royal wedding in the heart of Paris, with every dignitary, debutante and distant cousin invited. The trunks alone were a marvel. Custom Louis Vuitton, each stamped with the crest of the bride's family, polished until you could see your future in the reflection. Weeks of work, hundreds of hours spent sewing, hammering, and, when no one was looking, practicing your polite nod for when someone inevitably complained about too much gold. But then, disaster struck. On the morning of the great procession, as the sun crept over Paris and the first notes of a very expensive orchestra began to waft through the streets, the trunks were gone. Not all of them, just the most important half, naturally. The ones containing the wedding dress, the gifts, and a collection of personal letters that would make even the most seasoned gossip columnist blush. Panic spread through the palace like a spilled bottle of ink. The footmen searched, the butlers conferred, and the royal wedding planner was last seen hyperventilating into a monogrammed pillowcase. The bride, usually calm, threatened to cancel the whole thing and elope to Nice, where, rumour had it, people married with only a suitcase and a sense of adventure. All eyes turned to you, the humble trunk maker. Who else would know the ins and outs of these masterpieces, they asked. You, who had lovingly stitched every seam, suddenly found yourself cast as the prime suspect. It didn't help that you'd once made a joke about hiding a wedding cake in a trunk for emergencies. Aristocrats have long memories and very little patience for irony, but suspicion only makes you sharper. You launch your own investigation, channeling your inner Sherlock Holmes, minus the pipe, and plus a persistent glue stain on your vest. The clues are odd. A set of muddy footprints, a faint whiff of cheap cologne, and a half-eaten pastry left near the loading dock. Almond, with a suspiciously bitter aftertaste. You interrogate the staff, only to discover that most of them would rather discuss the wedding menu than the missing trunks. As the day wears on, the suspects multiply. Was it the rival trunk maker, notorious for his envy and his fondness for sabotaging monograms? The mysterious guest who arrived from Vienna claiming to be a distant cousin, but unable to pronounce the bride's name? Or the palace cat, who had recently developed a habit of hiding in the luggage for naps, and was now nowhere to be found? The tension builds until finally a breakthrough. A porter reports seeing a group of young men struggling to wheel a suspiciously large pile of trunks through a side entrance. They were disguised as musicians, which, in hindsight, should have been a clue. The Royal Orchestra never travelled with quite so much baggage. You follow the trail to a nearby inn where, in a room reeking of victory and pastry crumbs, you find the missing trunks, the would-be thieves snoring beside them. The motive? Boredom, mostly. Also, a wager. Someone had bet that it was possible to steal the Queen's bloomers and live to tell the tale. You return the trunks, accept the grateful thanks of the royal family, plus a discreet request to forget about the letters, and quietly decline the offer to become the palace's official director of luggage security. The wedding goes off without another hitch. The bride walks down the aisle, the gifts are opened, and Paris forgets its brief panic, at least until someone misplaces the cake knife. As for you, you go back to the workshop with a new story, a little more respect, and a secret satisfaction that this time the luggage made the party, even if it took a detour through Paris's seedy underbelly to get there. And if you find a stray almond pastry in your coat pocket a week later, you'll just call it a souvenir of the greatest heist that never quite made the history books. Centuries later, the world worships the LV logo, but you know the truth. Every bag was paid for in long nights, aching backs, and the collective paranoia of anyone who ever packed for a trip. Congratulations, your suffering is now iconic. Luxury, it turns out, is built on sleeplessness. Long before the monogram canvas hung from celebrity shoulders and became shorthand for "I can afford to lose this at the airport," it was the signature scent of anxiety and over-caffeination in a Parisian workshop. Night after night, you stitched, hammered, and glued until your hands forgot what softness felt like and your eyes developed a permanent squint. You measure time not in days, but in deadlines, the relentless parade of orders, the last-minute panic before royal weddings, and the urgent telegrams from clients who swear their happiness depends on one more hidden pocket. You can trace every great innovation, every ingenious compartment, secret latch, and adjustable strap to one simple, universal truth. Rich people are deeply, deeply afraid of losing their stuff, and you, dear craftsman, have always been the silent guardian against the great calamity of misplaced cufflinks and runaway bonnets. Each sleepless night brought a new anxiety. Did you stitch the lining perfectly? Did you remember the secret compartment for the Viscount's love letters? Did you spell Countess correctly in gold leaf? Or will there be another 3-day sulk and a public scandal? And yet, with every exhausted dawn, you find yourself oddly proud. Each trunk, suitcase, and hat box is a testament to persistence, a physical memory of your careful hands and your willingness to sacrifice sleep for a stranger's peace of mind. You know that behind every glamorous departure from a marble hotel lobby is a small army of invisible hands who gave up their Saturday nap to make sure a lock wouldn't jam in front of an audience. You watch the world change and the legend grow, the LV monogram, once hand-stamped in the soft glow of a workshop candle, now glitters in the lights of Paris, New York, and Tokyo. Bags become collector's items, auctioned for the price of a country estate. Old trunks are displayed in museums, their scratches and stains treated as artifacts. Look, people say, this one survived the Orient Express, this one crossed the Atlantic, this one belonged to someone important. No one ever asks who patched the handle after that unfortunate incident with the marmalade. The modern era arrives with its own brand of absurdity. People now wait in line for hours to purchase a bag designed to be out of stock, and vintage is code for smells faintly of regret and mothballs. You read glossy articles about the timeless romance of Louis Vuitton and laugh softly, remembering the time you spent a whole night scraping glue off your elbows so you could shake hands with a duchess. Sometimes a client will pause, peer closely at a seam, and ask, "How long did this take?" You smile and give the polite answer, but you both know the real measure is not hours or francs, but lifetimes. Generations of hands, sleepless nights, and the accumulated wisdom of people who learned that true luxury isn't about owning beautiful things, it's about the people who made them beautiful in the first place. So you keep working, keep inventing, and keep reminding yourself that, in the world of Louis Vuitton, insomnia is just another mark of authenticity. Legacy is heavy, luxury is rarely restful, but somewhere, in every bag, is the memory of your labour, a little sleepless, a little absurd, and entirely unforgettable. And tonight, as you tuck away the tools and turn off the light, know that you've traded sleep for something even rarer. A place in history, stitched in gold, and still a little sore in the morning. It's the 1880s, and you've just received a letter from a baroness requesting a trunk with 6 secret pockets, a mirrored vanity, and a compartment for her pet ferret. Welcome to customer requests so bizarre, you start to suspect the ultra-wealthy view you as part craftsman, part therapist, and part magician. You always thought making luggage for the rich would be a matter of taste and discretion, a bit of gold trim here, a custom lining there. You soon discover it's a performance art, and the world's wealthiest have never met a boundary they weren't willing to commission you to cross. For every sensible trunk, there are a dozen requests that belong in a fairy tale or perhaps a fever dream. The Baroness is only the latest in a long parade of eccentric patrons. Her instructions arrive in lilac-scented envelopes, accompanied by a diagram that looks suspiciously like a treasure map. The 6 secret pockets must be invisible to the untrained eye, but easily accessed with a flourish. The mirrored vanity should double as a signalling device, in case I'm lost in the Alps or bored at tea, and the ferret suite pardon compartment should be lined with the finest silk and include, if possible, a tiny chaise lounge. You sigh, sharpen your pencils, and get to work. The Baroness's ferret Gaston visits the shop for a fitting. You quickly learn that ferrets are less interested in luxury than in chaos, and Gaston escapes into the upholstery scraps twice before lunch. Nevertheless, by midnight you've designed a trunk so complex that it requires its own instruction manual. You wonder if you should include a map for future archaeologists who find it buried in a Parisian attic centuries from now. But Gaston is not alone. You build trunks for parrots, trunks for cheese, and once, at the insistence of a Swedish count, a trunk fitted with a miniature greenhouse for his prized orchids. The orchids do not survive the journey, but the count insists it was a spiritual victory. Another client requests a trunk that can function as a portable artist's studio, with compartments for brushes, paints, canvases, and the occasional emergency inspiration. Every letter that arrives from a new aristocratic client is a game of mad libs and wish fulfillment. The Marquise de Noirmoutier sends a shopping list. I require a trunk that can serve as a fainting couch in emergencies, hold exactly 24 pairs of shoes, and conceal an entire tea service. The word emergencies remains undefined. You choose not to ask. Some requests push the limits of legality and physics. A Russian prince wants a trunk lined with lead, for security naturally, which promptly bends the wheels on the delivery cart. A British explorer insists on a trunk with a collapsible bathtub for hygiene on the go. The finished product leaks spectacularly the first time he uses it in the Sahara, but he still writes to thank you, claiming he bathed under the stars among the camels like a king of old. You soon realize you're not just making luggage, you're making dreams, sometimes fevered, sometimes impractical, always deeply personal. You become a confidant for secrets, a sounding board for impossible ideas, and occasionally an accessory to pet-based mischief. The rich do not see you as a mere artisan. You're their co-conspirator in the great pageant of aristocratic absurdity. At the end of each day you marvel at what has passed through your hands. Trunks with hidden jewellery drawers, travelling libraries, miniature liquor cabinets, and the occasional false bottom for reasons politely left unexamined. You may never be as rich as your clients, but your life is infinitely more interesting. And as Gaston the ferret curls up in his silk-lined hideaway, you can't help but smile. After all, who else can claim to have built the only trunk in Paris with a chaise lounge fit for a mustelid? If you thought today's tabloids were ruthless, try surviving the whispers of 19th century Paris, where a single bad review could haunt your grandchildren. Your job now includes dodging slander about inferior stitching, mysterious stains, and allegations that the Vuitton family fortune was built on black market buttons. In Paris, reputation is everything. A city built on elegance and art, yes, but also on secrets, slander, and enough petty rivalries to make a soap opera jealous. You can craft the finest trunk in the world, but one poorly timed rumour and you'll spend the next decade fielding questions about that time you used horsehair instead of silk lining. Never mind that it was only once, and only because the shipment of silk got lost in a spectacularly French transportation strike. Every café, salon and corner shop is a breeding ground for speculation. You hear your own name, and the name Vuitton, tossed casually into conversations about royal affairs, opera scandals, and who paid too much for a melon at the market. Yesterday, a shopgirl asked you if it's true you once sewed a love letter into the lining of a trunk as a secret message for a Russian princess. You smile mysteriously, never confirm, never deny. Sometimes the legend is more useful than the truth. The rumour mill grinds on. Word spreads that your latest batch of monograms came out crooked, or that a rival claims your patented glue is just melted down horse hooves and cheap cologne. Someone hints that the mysterious stain on Madame de Launay's trunk is actually evidence of a midnight rendezvous gone wrong. The truth. Her nephew spilled plum jam during a particularly enthusiastic picnic, but try explaining that to the Parisian imagination. Your clients, for all their sophistication, are the most credulous. One week everyone wants a secret compartment for documents. The next, nobody will touch a trunk unless you swear, under penalty of scandal, that the leather was blessed by a bishop and tanned with water from the Seine. You don't recommend either, for the record. If a countess finds a wrinkle in her velvet lining, she won't just complain. She'll hint to all her friends that you've lost your touch, and suddenly, society matrons are whispering behind fans at the ballet. Rivals fuel the fire. Competitors sneak peeks at your window displays and report shocking discoveries to anyone who will listen. I heard Vuitton uses counterfeit brass, murmurs one. Their new apprentice can't even sew straight, says another. You catch a rival shop owner examining your trunks with a magnifying glass, tisking loudly before scurrying off to spread the word that your corners aren't as sharp as they used to be. Then there's the family fortune. People love a good scandal, and nothing draws the city's attention like a hint of impropriety. One evening at a dinner party, you hear a baron explaining that Vuitton wealth comes not from luxury, but from a secret black market button ring. You nearly choke on your wine. The next day, a child approaches the workshop and offers you a very rare button, just in case you need to make more money. You buy it for luck, Sometimes the rumours are so outlandish you can only laugh. Someone insists that Vuitton trunks are so secure they've been used to smuggle royal babies. Another swears that the family crest is a code for a lost treasure map, and you spend a week fielding letters from amateur explorers hoping for clues. You learn to surf the waves of gossip, dodging the worst, embracing the best, and occasionally planting a rumour of your own. Did you hear about our new trunk that repels moths and bad moods? Because in Paris, reputation is as much a work of art as any trunk. You stitch, you polish, and you smile, knowing that tomorrow's gossip is just another story waiting to be lined in silk. And at the end of the day, if your grandchildren have to answer a few awkward questions, at least they'll have the best luggage in the city. Progress. Someone invents an electric heating element for first-class trunks. What could go wrong? Only everything. You spend months fielding complaints about toasted trousers and smouldering socks. Turns out not all innovation is welcome when your core demographic fears electricity. It was supposed to be the future, a new era of luxury, convenience, and trunks that could finally keep your cashmere wrinkle-free on the journey from Paris to St. Moritz. The city's brightest minds collaborated with the finest trunk makers to create a marvel. A travel case with an electric coil, capable of warming clothes to the perfect temperature. No more shivering in cold castles, no more putting on a frosty frock at dawn. The aristocracy would be both fashionable and cosy, swaddled in preheated underthings. What could possibly go wrong? At first, the excitement is contagious. Ads trumpet the modern miracle of electricity. Ladies' magazines extol the virtues of gentle warmth and effortless elegance. Early adopters flock to the workshop, eager to be seen as both stylish and scientifically advanced. Trunks with little Bakelite switches line up in the atelier, awaiting their moment in the limelight. Then the complaints begin. "My petticoat is singed," writes one countess, sending along a faintly smoky skirt as proof. "Is it supposed to smell like that?" asks a baron, waving a pair of socks with a delicate aroma of scorched almonds. A viscount, ever the innovator, attempts to use the heating element as a tea kettle, and nearly floods his sleeper car with boiling water. The concept is brilliant, he assures you, but perhaps next time label the compartments more clearly. You try to troubleshoot. You explain, with increasing desperation, that the heating element is for clothes, not for warming champagne, melting chocolate, or roasting chestnuts. Still, your clientele, raised on a diet of candlelight and superstition, remains sceptical. "Electricity is very new, you see," whispers the Duchess, glancing nervously at her glowing trunk. "Are you sure it won't attract lightning? Or ghosts?" You become a reluctant expert in electrical safety. Instructions are rewritten, demonstrations are held. You hire a charming assistant to show clients how not to burn their travelling wardrobe to a crisp. Still, disaster follows. The new trunks blow fuses in grand hotels, plunge railway compartments into darkness, and once, memorably, turn a dinner party into a panic when a trunk begins to hum ominously in the corner. The fashion press turns on you with the speed of a scandalized dowager. Is this the end of taste? One headline shrieks, followed by "Vuitton's shocking new trunks, blessing or curse." Gossip spreads that the electric cases cause hair to stand on end, attract bats, and in one spectacularly imaginative rumour, allow Russian spies to eavesdrop via the handle. Demand plummets. The aristocracy quietly returns to warming their shawls by the fire and boasting that some things are better done the old-fashioned way. Back at the workshop, the artisans sigh in relief. The electric trunk era is declared a bold experiment and quietly phased out. The remaining cases are cannibalized for their locks and hinges, the heating coils repurposed for, well, no one is quite sure what. Maurice the Rat is spotted napping inside a decommissioned electric trunk, blissfully unaware of the drama that once swirled around him. Yet, as you sweep the last Bakelite knobs into the bin, you can't help but feel a twinge of pride. True, not all innovation is welcome, and not every bright idea ends in glory. But for a brief, electric moment, you pushed the boundaries of luggage, tried something new, and gave Paris a story that will be told long after the scorch marks fade. And isn't that, in the end, the true mark of fashion? Taking risks, looking foolish, and surviving to try again. So you hang up your voltage tester and go back to what you do best, crafting trunks that don't catch fire. For now. Every season, new fakes flood the market, each more brazen than the last. Your brilliant solution, a hidden signature, a secret stitch, maybe a curse or two, only seems to make the counterfeits more collectible. It's like fighting a hydra, except the hydra is also selling souvenirs outside your workshop. You used to believe imitation was the highest form of flattery. That was before you started seeing knockoff trunks with your design, sometimes before your own left the shop floor. The counterfeiters are fast, clever, and apparently telepathic. You introduce a new monogram style, and within a week, there's a street vendor hawking genuine Louis Vuitton at half the price and twice the enthusiasm, complete with hand-painted accents and a faint aroma of something you sincerely hope isn't fish glue. In the beginning, you treat it as a challenge. You gather your team for late-night brainstorming sessions, plotting the kind of trunk security that would make a bank vault jealous. There are whispered debates over whether to use a special dye that changes colour in the rain, or a thread only visible by candlelight on the third Tuesday of the month. You add tiny signatures under flaps, invent a secret stitch known only to 3 people, and once, in a moment of frustration, threaten to add a mildly inconvenient curse to every bag, something like perpetual creaking or a zipper that always sticks at customs. But the copycats only get bolder. They start incorporating your anti-theft measures into their own designs, turning your hard work into yet another selling point. Buy now. With Invisible Stitch, just like the real thing, it becomes clear you're not just in a battle for sales, but for the soul of the brand itself. Every solution you devise is matched with new counterfeits, each one a little stranger than the last. You spot a trunk that combines 3 of your most complex designs, but in colours so garish even the family parrot would disapprove. You find monograms in backward script, trunks with secret compartments that are accidentally glued shut, and bags with linings made of yesterday's newspaper. Once, a client returns a fake trunk so convincing you have to check your own signature 3 times, and still aren't sure. Legal action is little help. For every letter your lawyer sends, 2 more stalls pop up on the boulevard, manned by vendors who insist you must be Monsieur Vuitton's cousin, because you're so interested in their wares. You begin to suspect that the real secret to eternal life is a steady supply of cease and desist letters and an ironclad sense of humour. It's not just the business at stake. The copycats sow confusion in society. Guests eye each other's luggage suspiciously at train stations. Is it real? Becomes the question du jour at every salon, and the only thing more fashionable than owning a Vuitton is being able to spot a fake at 10 paces. The counterfeit market takes on a life of its own, with its own folklore. The trunk that fell apart after one rainstorm, the Vuitton bag that contained a free sandwich as a bonus, the legend of the trunk lined entirely in cabbage leaves. Through it all, you persevere. You continue inventing, innovating, and perfecting your craft. The real joy you discover isn't just in outwitting the copycats, it's in watching your legacy ripple outwards, even if some of those ripples are shaped suspiciously like misspelled monograms. After all, if history is written by the victors, fashion is rewritten by the persistent, the paranoid, and the quietly amused. So you keep your secrets, share your laughs with fellow trunk makers, and smile every time you see a Louis Vuitton bag on the arm of a Parisian tourist. Because in the end, the real deal always finds a way to shine through, even if it takes a secret stitch, a dash of luck, and the occasional gentle curse. You think your life is glamorous until inventory week rolls around. Imagine counting every single trunk, handle, and lock in a freezing warehouse, while your supervisor recites the serial numbers like a Gregorian chant. By day 3, you start hallucinating tiny LV logos everywhere you look. Once a year, the workshop's hum of creation grinds to a halt, replaced by the soft despair of paperwork and the endless echo of numbers. The city outside is alive with laughter, carriages and music. Inside, you and your fellow craftspeople are entombed in a drafty warehouse, hunched in the glow of flickering lanterns, surrounded by mountains of trunks stacked higher than your ambition. The scent is less old money and more old leather, cold glue and regret. Inventory is supposed to be straightforward. Just count what's there, write it down, and move on. Instead, it's a week-long odyssey through every trunk, handle, lock, and scrap of decorative hardware the house has ever produced. You find yourself poring through stacks of nearly identical bags, each one more inscrutable than the last. The cold seeps into your bones. Your fingers go numb. Your only company is the supervisor, who takes his role as high priest of serial numbers very seriously, chanting sequences of digits with an almost religious fervour. It starts as a group effort, camaraderie in numbers, jokes about the time someone counted the same trunk 3 times because it was just so pretty. By midday, spirits sink. You run out of things to talk about, and the only sound is the rhythmic scribble of quills on endless ledgers. Someone sneezes and loses their place, triggering a 10-minute debate about whether Model 437B is accounted for or lost to the sands of time. You quickly learn that trunks multiply in storage. There are the obvious ones, shiny, lined up in neat rows. But then there are the oddballs, half-finished prototypes, mysterious boxes with faded tags, experimental luggage from an apprentice who left in disgrace. You stumble across a trunk so large you suspect it may be a portal to another dimension. "Do we count this one?" you ask. The supervisor shrugs, eyes glazed. Sleep deprivation takes its toll. By day 2 you dream of trunks in your sleep, only to wake and discover you're still counting them. By day 3 your eyes play tricks. You see LV logos dancing in the shadows, hear whispers in the buckles. You wonder if Morris the Rat is conducting his own rodent inventory behind the wardrobe, pen in paw. Lunch breaks are no salvation. You eat hunched over ledgers, chewing bread so stale it doubles as a paperweight. The only excitement is the annual game of Find the Missing Handle, a tradition born when someone realised half the hardware seemed to vanish between shipments. Every so often you uncover a treasure, a forgotten monogram, a stash of spare keys, a note from a long-retired foreman wishing you good luck. You'll need it. Yet, beneath the tedium, there's a strange unity. You're all in this together, apprentices, masters, and that one guy who always brings his own abacus. Jokes are whispered, nicknames bestowed. The act of counting becomes a ritual, a shared ordeal that links you to every craftsman who ever cursed a misnumbered trunk. Finally, mercifully, the week ends. The last trunk is tallied, the last lock checked. You emerge from the warehouse blinking in the sunlight, numbers echoing in your ears, with a new appreciation for the art of creation and a deep, abiding hatred for ledgers. The city welcomes you back, and the workshop returns to life, until next year, when, inevitably, someone finds an uncounted trunk and the cycle begins anew. But for now, you survived, triumphant, exhausted, and forever haunted by the ghostly whisper of serial numbers in the night. So, tonight as you finally lay your head on a pillow that, mercifully, does not smell like glue, varnish, or unresolved family trauma, let's take a moment to reflect on the wild, glamorous, and occasionally unhinged journey you've just survived. You walk the cobbled streets of Paris, hauled trunks heavier than your worst emotional baggage, dodge thieves, nobles, and that one extremely angry baroness with very specific needs for her ferret. You've packed for emperors, sweated over secret compartments, inhaled more chemicals than the average science experiment, and endured the existential crisis that is Luxury Inventory Day. You witnessed the birth of the monogram, fashion's most persistent status symbol, and you learned that behind every timeless classic bag is an army of overworked, underappreciated craftspeople who have developed a sixth sense for spilled wine, hidden jewellery, and the exact moment a client is about to become unreasonable. Luxury, it turns out, was never just about leather and gold. It was about survival. It was about keeping up appearances while patching together secrets and stitches, holding your breath through Parisian rumour storms, and realising that even the most iconic logo can't buy happiness, sleep, or immunity from accidental trunk fires. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a bed that doesn't require an annual inventory, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the people who built the comforts you enjoy, the ones who endured toxic glue, impossible customers, and fashion emergencies so you wouldn't have to. Because history, even when it's covered in canvas and gold, is a story of stubborn, hopeful, deeply tired people just trying to make it through another day. Rest easy, knowing your pyjamas are not monogrammed, your valuables are safe, probably, and your greatest worry is which side of the bed to choose. Sweet dreams, and remember, if anyone ever tells you luxury is effortless, just smile and imagine the annual glue-sniffing contest at the Vuitton workshop. History may be ridiculous, but at least tonight you get to sleep in peace. Good night.